presenting your host for the Racecoin podcast, Jay.
What's going on, my Racecoin fans? I'm here with Kaz Grala, number 21 Hot Screen Chevrolet for Richard Childress Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
So you grew up in Boston and started at the age of 4, so early, like most people these days, racing, and you've already started to win championships. How did that affect your racing mentality as a child?
I would say my success at a young age in go-karts is definitely what kind of pushed me in the direction of racing, because by the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I had tried every sport out there, including racing, and racing was definitely the one that I was best at, and it was the one that I loved the most. I've always had a passion for motorsports, so being able to get that validation of winning races and winning championships from such a young age already definitely helped lead me down this path.
It sounds like your parents really drove you into a lot of different sports at such a young age too. What other sports did you do when you started off?
Oh gosh, I've done swimming, I've played tennis, I've played baseball, soccer, honestly, you name it, I tried it. And just to kind of see where my passion was and what I liked. And my parents were big on kind of letting me try everything and seeing what suited me best. And for me, it was racing.
So when you were doing, so many different sports and stuff, it couldn't just been the wins in racing that drove you to say that, this is what I really want to do and turn it into a passion. What was it that really transformed the wins into something that was a real passion?
Well, I just love driving and I love racing. And there's something so peaceful about being in a car or at the time in a go-kart where it's just you and the vehicle connected. And there's no outside distractions. There's no phones. There's no people talking to you. It's just you and the car. So I really love that about it. And even to this day, of course, as I've made it up through the levels of racing now, I have a spotter. I have a crew chief. There is a lot going on still. I've got a lot to manage inside the car too. So I don't know if I would say it's quite as peaceful as a go-kart. But to some extent, it definitely is still very calming, and I just love that about it.
Yeah, I guess it's that zone that people talk about in various different sports or various different fields that they feel like they get into, where it's this perfect balance of doing something yet feeling like you're not doing something. Is that what you're referring to?
Exactly, and you're right. It's in every sport. Every athlete who's good at what they do gets into that zone, and for me, I never reached that zone in any of the other sports, but racing I sure did. So for me, this was kind of natural.
That's awesome. And what about the story of your dad's journey to America? Did that have an influence on the kind of aspirations you had as well?
Yeah, absolutely. My father and his family are from Poland originally, and my dad moved over here when he was just 8 years old with his family. And ironically enough, his family moved over to America because they wanted to buy a car, and they were not able to do that. They didn't have the money or the resources in Poland to do that. So it started really with my grandfather who wanted a car and chased his dream over here. And then he passed that down to my dad. Of course, growing up here, cars weren't quite as foreign to him as they may have been to his father. So instead of just wanting a car, he wanted to race cars. And he did that. And so that's kind of what familiarized me with racing, because when I was really little, my dad was still racing. He raced sports cars over in the IMSA, what's now the IMSA series, Daytona prototypes, and won the championship in that. And then he hung up his helmet so that he wouldn't be gone for my childhood and as I grew up. So he stayed home more, and I guess in the end kind of ended up passing me the torch, and now I'm the one racing in the family.
And when he passed you the torch, he really passed you the torch, because, you've been the youngest winner in the series for the history of the Hickory Motorsport Speedway. You were the youngest driver to compete in the event, the youngest NASCAR winner in track history, youngest winner of the KBM's history, youngest driver ever to compete the 24-hour Daytona. The list is ridiculously long. How did this affect your mindset towards racing? Like, did it make you want to be the first for more things, or was it really about the titles, or how did it all kind of play on your mind?
Yeah, I think that the funny part is most of those titles you don't actually find out about until after the fact. Like for instance, the Daytona race that made me the youngest Daytona winner in NASCAR history. Well, going into the race, I didn't know that if I won, I would set that record. Who knew? but then you win it and you find out after the fact and like, wow, that is pretty cool. So I guess it's not really something you chase. It's just something that sometimes you hear these things after the fact and think, well, that's pretty cool. But honestly, I think racing itself fundamentally keeps you humbled. I mean, you can have as many wins or championships or successes as possible, but you're still only as good as your last race. That's what we say in racing. So for all the highs, there's certainly lows to match them, and it's a very up and down sport. So it keeps you humbled and it keeps you grounded. So every week you're just working to be better and to try to be the best on the track as you possibly can be.
And how do you manage that? I mean, obviously it's a lot of pressure going with these extreme highs and extreme lows. It's not just a little bit, it's not just a typical bad day at work. A bad day at work could mean millions of pounds lost, no more sponsorship, end of your life for some people sometimes, in unfortunate circumstances. So normally people have an equilibrium and they go up and down a little bit. Yours is, a roller coaster. So what do you do to try and stay sane and handle this sort of pressure?
Yeah, I mean, it is difficult. And racing is one of the industries where you never fully feel like you have job security because as a driver, our contracts just aren't that long. Even the cup level contracts are only a couple years. You still don't know what's going to happen with your life when those are up. So you're always kind of racing, thinking that you need to prove yourself, no matter how big of a name you may be. I mean, at the cup level, Jimmy Johnson, Kyle Busch, well, they're still racing every week to prove themselves. It's just what we do. So there is a lot of pressure for sure. And frankly, the only way to handle that is just to look 1 week at a time. So for us, obviously I'm competing part-time this year, but for the drivers who are full-time, who are racing every single week, I mean, they spend Monday recapping the previous weekend. And then by Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's all focus on whatever this weekend's race is. And you do the race on Saturday, in our case for Xfinity. And when that checkered flag falls, everything that you've done this week to prepare for that race suddenly is over. It's done. It's in the past. You're already looking to the next week. So it's
How
really,
do you do that, though? Because it sounds like one of these things where you're meant to get over it like that. But typically, like any normal situation, like a breakup, you're not going to be like, oh well, that's over. Let's go on to the next thing. Or it's not as simple as, oh, I lost my job, I'll just get a new one today. It doesn't work like that with our own mindsets, being human. So how do you train yourself to be a lot more quicker in terms of being able to get over these things?
You're absolutely right. It's not natural to be able to think of it that way, but you really have to, because I mean, let's say you have a bad race. Well, you can't dwell on that. You can't let that mentally affect you, because so much in this sport is mental. I mean, so much about how you race and how you drive and how good you are is about confidence and knowing that you can make this move, you can do this, and you're going to make it work. So there's a lot of the mental aspect in this sport. So if you had a bad race last weekend, by Monday, when you get to the shop and you start working for the next weekend, that needs to be out of your mind and completely over with. But
how, though? The main question is how?
I don't know. I guess experience. I mean, I've been doing it for so long. I've grown up racing. I don't know anything else. So for me, it's only natural. I feel like if I were to have started racing at my age right now, I'd have a long list of things that I would struggle with and have no idea how to do or how to handle. But I guess for most of us, we've been doing it so long that it's part of who we are. I mean, I feel like a huge part of just my personality and who I am as a person is racing. It's, intimately woven into who I am. So I guess that's just something that I'm used to, but by no means is it easy. And even if you win the race, you still can't dwell on that. And
yeah, exactly. It's a two-way thing. Yeah.
You got to get back to work for the next weekend. Because if you're soaking that win too much, you're going to be terrible the next weekend. So it's always about focus, and it doesn't matter if that's at the shop that week preparing for the race or in the race car itself. We can't break focus. We can't afford to lose sight of the ball and know what we have to do to succeed. So that's all we do. I like to say that race car drivers, we are professional perfectionists. We just can't make mistakes. We can't afford to make mistakes. So the only way to do that is complete focus.
That sounds like a very draining life in some sense, but I feel like there is the pro of being able to do what you love, which also feeds the energy of what you do. Where am I right in saying that, or like where is your thoughts on this?
You're absolutely right. It is draining, and it does get very tiring, but because we all love what we do and this is our passion, it doesn't really feel like we're working per se. So that's definitely the positive side of it. But you have to maintain some sort of balance between your professional career and your personal life, and you do have to make sure that you give yourself time for your own sanity. But yes, it is easy to get sucked down a rabbit hole in racing and have it completely consume your life, because at the end of the day, if you want to be the best on track, you have to outwork everybody else and put the time and energy into it. And that's endless. There's 24 hours a day. At some point you need to sleep, but every minute you could be doing something productive to be better. So it's a tough balance.
So in your free time, obviously you've managed to, in your time off, you managed to create a competitive NASCAR team in just under 2 weeks, is one of the headlines. So it sounds like a news headline, it sounds like something that people made up just for to get an extra view and not reality. What was it really like?
It really wasn't like reality. It was a big challenge. So I'll give the background on the story, obviously, but so last season, I started the year driving for JGL Racing, which was a team in the NASCAR Xfinity Series. And they signed me for a full season deal, but only 10 races into the 33 race season, the team owner, unfortunately, got sick and had to shut the team down. So that left me without a ride for the rest of the year. And so what we ended up doing was, as part of the contract being broken for the full season deal that no longer was, the team owner gave me 3 race cars. And I'm like, well, what am I going to do with 3 race cars? I'm not a race team. I'm one person who drives them.
Yeah.
So I went to my dad's chassis manufacturing company, Fury Race Cars. They build late models and modifieds for grassroots racing here in America, and said, well, here are these cars. Can we start a team? Can we run them? Can we do some races this year? And the next race, which was Charlotte, was less than 2 weeks away. And somehow we got some guys together, some employees who were already at Fury Race Cars, a couple new people. We got a transporter to get them to the racetrack, and we showed up at Charlotte with the race car. And we had no idea how we were going to be, but we went out and we actually finished top 10 in our debut in our first race. And that was a huge milestone for us. And we ended up doing 12 more races last year as Fury Race Cars. And we got a top 5 at Daytona in an old show car. We definitely had some cool success stories. We finished 8th at the first Roval race ever in a road course car. So we had a lot of fun last year. And really that's the springboard that gave me this opportunity this year to drive for Richard Childress Racing.
It sounds like so many parts, not just speaking in terms of the cars themselves, but to the whole team, to the people, to everything that has to come together so seamlessly in order for all these things to happen in such a short period of time, and for you to have the contacts, for you to know people who can do something, and for people to just be trusting in you and your father and the company and everything else to actually come together and put it together. So it's I guess it's a testimony not only to the relationships that you guys have built over time, but also to the amount of fortune and luck that you've had to put it together as well, as things kind of come together. And it's amazing. I mean, what has that been like compared to the actual process of racing itself for you? How would you compare the two?
It's a double-edged sword. I mean, of course, having to kind of help and work through all of that last year took a lot of time away from me from actually being able to focus on the driving aspect and become a better driver myself. But the positive side is I got to learn a lot about the behind the scenes of how race teams operate and how this sport really is. Rather than just being the driver, I got to see all sides of it. I mean, but before the Charlotte race, in those 2 weeks, we had to find parts and pieces. We had to find employees. We had to find pit boxes, generators. wheels. I mean, simple stuff. I had to find a spotter. We had to submit all of our entry forms, which were past the deadline, and get special approval. So there was just so much that had to happen. And of course, the biggest being sponsorship and in making the bottom line work, and in making sure that we could get to the racetrack with the proper funding. So I definitely feel like I'm a much more well-rounded driver now because of it, and more so than a lot of the guys in the series, because I've been more heavily involved with the inner workings of my own career than just getting in the race car to drive.
And how has that changed the way you drive? What sort of changes of level of appreciation, or in terms of understanding the car dynamics a bit better? Like what is impacted? What sort of impacts has that had on your driving?
Well, I mean, I think it makes me appreciate every race more, and appreciate what it takes to get to the racetrack, between funding and actual logistics of the race team. It takes a lot. It takes an army to get there. So I appreciate it a lot more. But when I put the helmet on and I strap into the race car, nothing's different. You can't ever let anything be different. At that point, it's just you on the track doing what you do, doing what you've done your whole life. And from there, all distractions are completely gone. You don't think about anything else. You don't even know about anything else. That's just what you're doing. You're living in the moment and racing. And there's nothing but you in the car.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the sponsors as well as a huge part, obviously, of racing, and Hot Scream is your sponsor. How did you manage to find them like a spicy ice cream? Where did that come from?
Well, that's a pretty cool story too, actually. So last year, while we were racing as Fury race cars, we had a fan actually come to our shop and say, "Hey, I know a guy from this company called Hot Scream. They make spicy ice cream. It's a new company, and the owner is really into racing. So give him a call. Here's his contact information." So since last year, we were an underdog team. We were underfunded and didn't have all the resources that the big teams had. People wanted to help us. We became a bit of a fan favorite, and that ended up giving us a connection to a company that was willing to sponsor us. And so they were on our car last year at Homestead, the last race of the season. They loved it and said, "Let's come on board for a slightly bigger capacity for 2019." And of course, with it being a part-time deal, it wasn't enough races to justify the overhead cost of operating your own team. So Fury wasn't really an option for us. So we said, well, where can we take a sponsor and get them the absolute best treatment and best product they possibly can get? And here at Richard Childress Racing, there's nobody better in the sport for maintaining sponsorship relationships than here. So it's been a fantastic season so far. We haven't had the best of luck so far in my first 3 races. We've had a little something go wrong each time, but I've got another shot at it this weekend at New Hampshire, and hopefully we can have a clean, mistake-free race. And if we do, I've got no doubt that we've got the speed to get up there and be contenders.
Awesome. And I'm curious, what are the flavors like? I mean, what's your favorite flavors? Like, what does spicy ice cream taste like?
So it's not what you think. I feel like a lot of people assume that it's going to be weird, gross, gimmicky flavors like buffalo wing ice cream. Not at all. It's real sweet ice cream. It's vanilla ice cream with a flavor swirl in it. And they're normal ice cream flavors. They've got salted caramel, chocolate, strawberry, blackberry, espresso. The list goes on. So it's regular ice cream. It's just you start to get a little bit of a heat and a little bit of a kick in the back of your throat as you eat it, and you have to cool it down with the next bite. What's
the ingredient?
It's 8 proprietary blended peppers together inside that flavor swirl. So it really works and pairs very nicely with the ice cream because it's cold and sweet, but then you get that spicy heat in the background. It's a really cool balance.
It sounds like the sweet and sour, crisps that you sometimes get.
Exactly. Yeah, it's the same concept. It's like when you get dessert and you have ice cream and like hot chocolate cake. You have the mix of hot and cold, or like
yeah, it tastes nice.
The sweet and the sour. It's just another form of that.
One of the things that is quite apparent is that your life just seems like a CV made out of imagination. There's so much things that you've done, achieved, have number 1 spots for, the youngest titles for, and obviously with that comes a lot of appreciation for you and what you've done. And now that you've also worked as part of a team and creating a NASCAR team yourself, what sort of ideas do you have for what you want to do in terms of with that fame and that level of excellence that you've trained to work for? How do you want to transfer that? What would you like to do with that?
Well, I feel like I've learned a lot already in my life with what I've been able to do and accomplish. And I feel like, honestly, I could take the experience that I have in the racing industry and apply it to just about any job, because at the end of the day, racing's very well rounded. I mean, it has to do with you as an individual, but it has to do with teamwork, working with others. It has to do with the business aspect of things, the sponsorship side. It really makes you a very savvy business person as a whole. So I feel like I could take this experience anywhere, but my dream is to race. So I want to keep doing what I'm doing and hopefully succeed and be able to make this a long-term career for myself. So I'm working every day to try to make that a reality. And even though I've got this resume that you talk about, as a competitor, you're never satisfied. You always want more. So that's a work in progress every day for everybody in the sport, but I'm no exception.
That's amazing. I mean, to have the sort of drive and the competitive aspect to just keep going and amazingly just keep achieving more and more as time goes on. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And I feel like it will be amazing if the fans could just have one more message from you about what they can do to really have an improvement in their level of work ethic and discipline. Like, what would you say to them to inspire them and help them feel like this is something that they can actually do themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think racing is the kind of sport that really anybody can do. It just takes the commitment and the time. But I feel that that's no different than anything in life. No matter what the sport or the job or career that you want, if you just put all of your energy into it and all of your time and really dedicate yourself, you can definitely achieve anything. So that's what I've done so far in my career to get to where I'm at, and I don't plan on stopping anytime soon.
Awesome. And we don't want you to stop anytime soon either. So it's been a pleasure having you on the RaceCoin podcast.
Thank you very much. Anytime.
If you like this episode of the RaceCoin podcast, go ahead and subscribe so you can get notified every Monday when a new episode is out. And don't forget to check us out on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter.